Yo, what's up, everybody? You are live on Shally's Alley, and this is my final episode of 2024. You thought I was going to say of forever, right? No, just of the year, because next week is December 27th, and it's right between Christmas and New Year's. And y'all, I need a break. Like, seriously, this has been one of those years that I shall go down in the history books as erased from my memory completely. It fucking sucked. Okay, 2024 was just bad in so many ways. You know, at my age, things get a little tricky. But when you almost die twice in one year, you know it's a bad year. So anyway, here I am. You know, survived cancer, rang the bell, and then a week later, one of the creepy side effects from cancer treatment. By the way, I had none of the really bad ones, but then all of a sudden I'm done with the treatment, and one of the creepy ones kicks in and sends me to the hospital for 4 days in the ICU. So there you go. You never take shit for granted, right? Sure does give you a lot of perspective. Oh, look, Chrissy Wilson says hi. Hey, Chrissy. Woohoo! All right. So, y'all, you're probably wondering who this handsome fellow with the really cool backdrop is. That is no backdrop. That is actually his recording studio slash what's it called? Slash
Home office, podcast studio, you name it.
exactly. Yeah, all of that good stuff. With me today is Ray Thomas, also known as AWS Some or AW Awesome or whatever.
It's awesome.
It's just awesome, right? Otherwise known as Awesome. Ray was actually introduced to me by someone that we had on the show earlier that was talking about um, different reasons why, as a recruiter, you should get certified in the I don't know if I'm saying this right, certified in the profession or certified in this in the skill set of your candidates. And it was I thought it was a really appealing idea. And he said, you know, you should talk to Ray because he is what they call a bar raiser at Amazon. And I'm like, ooh, that's something I haven't heard in a while. So I wanted to talk to Ray about both of those things, the bar raiser thing and also the certification thing. But let's start with the bar raiser thing. So for everybody that's not familiar with that term, at least not in recruiting anyway, what is a bar raiser? Can you tell us what does that mean to be a bar raiser?
Yeah, absolutely. And before I get to that, Shally, thank you for sharing about your journey, personal journey. Very happy you pulled through.
Yeah, me too.
Cancer hits it's something that hits everybody. It hit our family, so it's something that's very close to me. So congrats on that. And then Chrissy, hello, nice to see you, and welcome. Happy to have you here as well. And thank you, Shally, for inviting me, and thank you, Matt, for the introduction. My background, my background, just quickly, and then we'll go into the bar raiser portion of it. I've been a tech recruiter for over 2.5 decades. January 6th will actually be my 6th year at Amazon Web Services. And Becoming Awesome is actually the podcast I have within AWS. I'm the only TA-focused podcast. We're currently in holiday mode as well. We're going to be coming back in February, with a brand new show and whatnot. But
brand new show. Okay, yeah. I got to hear more about this.
Yeah, it's like as far as like how the structure will be, etc., and also the platforms in which we're scaling it out to. So we use bar raising at Uber. So yeah, I mean, once a lot of people started to understand what Amazon is doing and why they had this thing called a bar raiser. So let me demystify it a little bit. So a bar raiser is actually at Amazon is a very experienced employee who acts as an objective third party during the hiring process. This is to prevent someone from hiring their friend or former colleague just because they
Just for
know them.
favoritism, right?
Exactly, exactly. So what are we
Like you
responsible?
can hire your friend or former colleague if they
Yeah,
pass the but
yeah, yeah. But at the same time, you'll have a bar raiser that's not from the team, the org, or anything else, just to remove any biases. And they're the one. And let me like dive into like some of the roles and the qualification, kind of like the process of it all. But the role itself. So we have the Amazon leadership principles. There's 16 of them. That's literally the culture of thought, is what I tell people what it is. Uh,
okay.
so, so with that, we assess from a behavioral aspect during the interviews. The interviewers each have a couple of different leadership principles that they're assessing for, and we try to make a data-driven decision at it. So we try to identify candidates who perform better than 50% of the existing employees in a similar position. So if you are interviewing for an SDE2 position, the data that we're going to collect from both your functional and the leadership principles has to say that you're operating at a level that's better than 50% of the other SDE2s. Okay. We evaluate the candidates for long term potential,
Mhm.
overall fit with Amazon's culture. And then the end result is whether I'm part of the full interview process where I'm interviewing the candidate, or part of what we call just a pre-brief and debrief. I'm in all the debriefs where I help drive the decision making. I actually dig into everyone's feedback and then have a line of questions to kind of vet all the information that was given, to make sure that it's a data driven decision and not an assumption driven decision. So I tell candidates, and I actually told one just before this meeting of ours, right? I was actually preparing them. I say, I'm the one that's going to make sure that there are no biases, that we're not making an assumption, just
Just
because.
like an independent reviewer, like an
Exactly. And I want
unbiased, impartial reviewer
yeah,
of the process.
yeah.
Okay.
I want to make sure that everything is data. So just because make believe the interviewer didn't ask for a specific question and therefore we don't have that data, we shouldn't. So here's where I come in and say, well, we're not going to assume the negative because we didn't get that information. We have to assume the positive and we have to move forward. We shouldn't ding the candidate because maybe they had that data, maybe we didn't ask it. So again, it's a matter of trying to be very objective as a whole and make it fair, right? So again, how do you even become a bar raiser? You have to be nominated by your manager and peers and another bar raiser in order to say that person should be nominated to become one. And then you actually go through the whole shadow program where I shadow as a bar raiser in training other bar raisers. I would first listen in, walk through the whole process with them, and then what you call it, eventually start to lead the interviews myself in the program. And then there's a whole written summarization about the quality of my performance from each individual bar raiser that was shadowing me. And then it gets reviewed by the core team to say yes to this person or no. So it's actually it's actually very time consuming. It's very data driven, even from evaluating me. So that's where it's at. So again, we're holding Amazon's hiring bar. That's why we are the leader in what we do, is because we hire people that are better than us, right? So to help drive that, and then it continues to make sure that the candidate has a incredible journey, regardless of what the outcome is. It was a very fair process. So
Right, 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 right. Yeah, so that's I was at Microsoft, and back in the 80s, Microsoft introduced the concept of AA interviewer, an as appropriate interviewer, which predates the bar raiser program.
mhm,
And Amazon borrowed from that as appropriate process and added or adapted it to Amazon's leads, not leads, needs. There's a lot of similarities. I mean, the as appropriate in Microsoft is like independent and objective. It's also about high standards, raising the bars and like high
yeah,
standards. There's also some decision influence on both of those roles, and they both require training. They both require experience. But there's also some key differences. The From what I understand, the Amazon bar raiser, or the way that it's defined that way, focuses on exceeding the the standard versus the as appropriate is more about fairness in the process, or
Mhm.
like a final checkpoint.
Yeah.
So a little bit of a difference there. Um, the cross functionality of it, it's on the bar raiser side, it's always a different department. But I believe at Amazon, at Microsoft, sometimes they had people that might have even been in the same organization. So there could be a vertical, like your boss's boss's boss or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there were some differences and some similarities in it, and Amazon basically, you know, made this more about like the well, raising the bar is kind of the key, right? Focusing on the hiring above standard and raising the standard for everyone, in addition to the other aspects of fairness and everything else.
Yeah.
Um, but I think, is there like in the bar raiser, is there a veto? Like, can the bar raiser say no
Yeah.
or just express opinion?
Yeah, so we can say
You
no,
can say no.
and it's
Okay.
a very rare, but the veto, like, I've been one for a few years. I never vetoed anything because
By the time you get involved, there's been
yeah,
lots
the
of people.
whole the because we're part of the process from the very beginning to the end, right? You already have if you have, a team of recruiters that partner well with the hiring managers, you're
Mhm.
having the right people in the process in the first place. That candidate move forward for the right reasons to that final stage, which is only then when the bar raiser comes in to make sure you now have the panel of interviewers, you have the right people that are tenured enough to assess the candidate properly for what they're aligned to assess, right? So, for example, if it was someone on the tech side, right? Why would I have if we're interviewing a software development engineer? Why would we have someone on sales aligned to a tech competency to that person?
Right.
They don't know
Yeah.
what they're doing. They
It
don't know
doesn't
what to ask for,
doesn't
right?
make any
And all this,
sense. Right.
and then it's a horrible experience altogether, right? But
Right.
and then make believe you do have again, say it's all SDEs, right? But then some people might be stronger on the front end versus the back end.
Mhm.
You want to make sure that if we're hiring for back end engineers, right? You want to make sure you have back end engineers on that versus front end, regardless of their title. You have to vet all this stuff so they can actually take a look at the right things when assessing for system design, or if we're looking at the code, whether it's logical, maintainable, or data structure and algorithms, or the problem solving. Everyone's aligned, the expectations aligned. There's a rubric that they follow. So it's very data driven from every angle. And my job is to make sure right people, right tenure, right questions asked, right data collected, and then have an open conversation. Say, given everything we just heard, is this person better? Are they going to be successful long term? Worst thing to
And
do
you're assigned to a particular, like, I don't know, one or multiple particular, you call them leader. I'm sorry, you mentioned leadership.
leadership,
Some
leadership.
yeah. So you're assigned to like this is what you're measuring, right? They're not coming to you and saying, "Hey, what do you think about their development skills?"
I
Right?
actually am. I actually am based on the data that they collected. So I'm
That's what
someone that knows
got it.
every one of them well,
But
right? So
that's you're assigned a vertical,
yeah, yeah.
right?
So the way it works is you normally have the interviewers, they have the functional competencies as far as half of it, they
Mhm.
could be doing the coding stuff. Then you would have a couple of leadership principles that each one will be assigned to. Each one will be assigned to a couple of leadership principles. So if I'm part of the interview myself, I'm also going to have leadership principles
One
that
of
I'm
those,
going to be
right?
focused
Got
on.
it.
So then I make my vote. I put in my vote, and then I'm not seeing anyone else's vote until I enter my own. So this way,
That's
there's no biases injected, nothing. So it's a very fair process. So I'm only evaluating based on these leadership principles, would I think they'd be successful? My final vote can change based on reading everyone else's feedback as they come through. But
later on, but right.
later on,
Because you can have a conversation and change your mind,
absolutely,
and right,
absolutely,
but you should have
absolutely,
your unbiased, or I don't know if unbiased. There's always some kind of bias, but you should have your opinion
yeah,
uninfluenced by other people's opinions. So get this funny anecdote. This happened at an organization that I was advising and supporting, with a big, let's just say, redesign of the workflows, and we accidentally found out that the hiring managers were, um, what is the right way to say it? The hiring managers were circumventing the built-in um, regulatory or policies by what you were talking about. You're supposed to put your review in before you read anybody else's. Well, there were some hiring managers that were actually getting around that because in order to see someone else's comments, you have to submit your comments. So they were submitting blank comments so they can unlock the other, and then they would. It was like they were because the password or the gate was you have to submit your comments before you can see other people's.
Yeah.
So they figured out that if they submit like a blank comment, it unlocks it for everybody else. And we were like, oh my God. And so they were actually, and the reason we found this out was because we noticed some hiring managers canceling their interviews minutes before the interview as a pattern. Like, hey, Jenny, we noticed that the last 3 interviews you canceled were like right before the interview. You can't possibly have had 3 family, but like I get family emergencies or business emergencies. There's sometimes you have to cancel, but it was a little bit of a pattern. And we're like, well, I didn't want to complete the interview because at that point, and we're like, wait a minute, you read the other notes before. So
Yeah.
not only was she reading the notes before putting in her own notes, she was reading the notes before even doing the interview.
Yeah.
Can you
Yeah.
believe that?
That's horrible. And you know what? That impacts the candidate's experience, right? So we talk about,
Everybody, you
right?
make it now. You don't have a fair. Like you only have one interview,
Yeah.
and the entire company might be missing out on a good hire because somebody else did an interview. And the candidate is definitely being like literally snubbed
Yeah.
because we're going to schedule you with this person. Oh, never mind. Haha, just kidding. Here's the cake. Nope, not for you.
No, no. So you look at it this way, where
So bad.
one bad review can impact us in such the blast radius is massive given
It
the size of
shouldn't.
the organization we are, right? So we always say this was our tagline when I first joined. They said we're Earth's most customer obsessed organization. So when we talk about customers, almost everyone had shopped on Amazon.com. Period. Like almost everyone heard of
Right.
Amazon.
Whether
Almost
you do
everyone.
now or you
Yeah, we're an hour later. So our
yeah.
mentality is everyone's a customer. You have to do the right thing on their behalf. So even when I interviewed for the role, they asked me, "So Ray, who are your customers?" Shally, you know what I did? I had my glasses with me, and I took my glasses. I said, "See this lens? I see these glasses." I said, "The hiring manager and the candidates are equally as important. It's like the frame and the lenses within. One is useless without the other. They both need each other to function properly." So with that, it's 50-50. So if that hiring manager did that, it would have such a poor candidate experience. All it takes
Glasses
is
with no
for
frames or
them
frames.
tell their group of friends, say,
Mhm.
"Oh, this interview, this what happened, blah blah," and guess what happens? That person that could be a great hire for us, that a prospect that we're trying to get, says, "You know what? I'm not going to respond to that recruiter anymore."
Spreads.
It's done.
It's
It's
good,
done.
yeah, yeah, and all of a sudden, you can't unwind
Yeah.
reputation that you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube.
I'm
Um,
looking at Chrissy's comments, and I love how engaged she is. So again, great way to eliminate bias. Absolutely, the reason why we have the practices is fantastic, and also glad you ordered something today. My wife orders a lot, so do I. I'm a shopaholic, so I'm kind of used to getting a bunch of packages all the time. So
you I've actually met some folks that have admitted that they'll go to a store physically and like find the thing they want and then order it on Amazon.
yeah, or you
Like
just
you're
compare the
already
prices
at the
right there.
store.
Yeah, or you just compare the prices, depending on how
Right, right, right.
immediate you
Price
need
dropping.
it. Fine, I'll pay $1 extra because I could get it right there, or I ordered it, I save $5, or something like that. So I've done it. Totally guilty
It's
of it.
addictive, definitely. I mean, it's like definitely addictive, especially when you get it right away. I mean, but anyway, so this whole bar raiser thing is it sounds like a lot of work. It sounds like something you might, if your organization does this, you might want to aspire to, get in a position where you can be a bar raiser. It sounds like it does a lot of removing bias or removing bad bias because the
Yeah.
word bias is biased. Um, Bias can be good. Bias is what keeps us alive. Bias is why we don't get eaten by lions. But
Right.
um, so there's good bias. Like, oh my god, this is gonna kill me. I should probably run. That's
Right.
bias.
It's
But what
wisdom.
are the what are the what are the risks? and I'm not saying, air any dirty laundry, but like what, if not implemented correctly, what are some of the downsides or risks of a bar raising program within um, the recruitment workflow
So you have to have
potentially?
it. I think when you look at risk versus reward, obviously, like I said, there's a reason why we have been ahead of the competition in certain aspects of technology because of the bar we keep and how we hire and the
Sure,
diligence,
yeah, but like
right?
let's not
But
just
now,
tell somebody, "Hey, go do this," and then they do it the wrong way. So what are
but
the
there you go.
pitfalls you could fall into if you don't do it right?
So here's the thing. You mentioned biases, right? Some
Mhm.
people could be so, so focused on their work that they sometimes end up having a bias of like how it should be. Like myself as a recruiter, right? I've been a bar raiser for interviewers that are interviewing, right? Sorry, for recruiters that are interviewing, right?
Yeah, right.
So I'd have my own bias. What makes a great recruiter, et cetera, et cetera. So how do I
Okay.
go about? So we have all these mechanisms and all these trainings for busting your own personal biases.
To be
So we have
conscious
concentrate.
about your bias, to
Exactly,
know, yeah.
exactly. So we have like a
Like if
chat
you
board
are
for all the
biased, at
bars.
least you
Yeah,
know it and you can apply that knowledge to protect
yeah,
yourself from, making a decision that isn't fair, even though you're aware, like, I already know coming into this that I have this bias of how
yeah,
things are
yeah.
supposed to be done. Okay, so basically what you're saying is kind of beware of your unconscious
Personally.
bias and make sure you have a way to defeat that.
Yeah, absolutely,
Mm,
absolutely. And if it
okay.
sometimes means going in and checking and asking the bar raiser communities, like, hey, I think I might be doing this. That alone will trigger such a positive response because people know how self-aware you are, and you
So
have
they
to make
the
sure
the
you don't
bar the
fall
bar
for it.
racers, like, they talk to each other.
Yeah, we actually
Okay.
have like a chat. We have a Slack group, and we actually talk about some things that we're seeing, or we ask for advice, or like if there's a situation that they never seen before, they don't know how to handle. Someone else will say, "Hey, this is the best way. Here's why," etc. So we'll get advice from each other. So it's a big community that will support. There's over 1.5 million employees at Amazon all across. But if you look at the bar as a community, it's a fraction of a percent. Okay, that's how low the number is. It's all volunteer based, and this is the impact we're making for all these hires. So now you have a community that volunteers for such a pivotal part of building Amazon and all the different divisions of Amazon. I'm primarily AWS, right? But you end up being supported by the rest of the community. We have our own, a wiki. We have our own Brickspedia, it's like an encyclopedia of like, here's all, here's what to happen in these situations, etc. All these things are documented. So there's a lot of support, but it is voluntary work, and it's for the right reason. Some people think that you'll get promoted by, like, because you took this on. Like, no, this is not part of your promotion. It's not. It's actually
It's more
something.
work, right?
It's more work, but it is more work. It's almost like having a part-time job, a second part-time job. But it's the reason the people that want to do it is a special group of folks that want to be doing it is because we care. We want to make sure we have the right people. And at the same time, the reason why I personally became a bar raiser is because
Because
I
your name
was
is Ray, so you wanted to be a bar raiser.
no, I wish that was the case. But I was literally on a debrief where I'm the recruiter and there's a bar raiser, and I didn't like their approach. And I was very vocal saying, hey, I don't think that's fair. Or I don't think, or the bar raiser was not as familiar with the function.
Mm.
So when there's some data that wasn't being called out that they should have called out, I went and I jumped in and et cetera, et cetera.
And they're
And
like, "So you can do this better?" And you're like, "Yeah." And then you got
yeah, I
recruited
can.
in
Yeah, I
you got
can.
recruited into the
Yeah.
program.
So sometimes when I'm
You stepped
still
into
as a
that.
bar raiser sitting at, but like for my own candidates, I sometimes say, hey, as a fellow bar raiser, I do that now. As a fellow bar raiser, I need to ask this question because I'm seeing this,
Right.
you know, etc. So this is this thing. Are the bar raisers trained on specific interview competencies? Yeah, we have like all interviewers, period, have to go through a certification program before they're allowed to interview or even shadow an interview. So there's best interview practices, etc. That we have. So there definitely is a lot of training, and it's all about as far as specific interview competencies, you got to know the all leadership principles. The function is different. Where, for example, I won't be an SDE functional interviewer because I can't read code, but I can assess the feedback on the code that the other interviewers had mentioned. Hey, this code was, I was unstructured, was it scalable, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's easy to understand. And I understand why they said what they did. Versus, and at the same time, I could dive in and say, well, he didn't do this, so I don't think they have the ability to. Well, what specific data says they don't have the specific ability to? Because maybe you don't need to do it just that way. Maybe there's another way. And I asked the other interviewers, can this be done a different way?
So it's role specific.
Role specific. Yeah. So
Okay.
the bar raise can.
Because I mean, there's also there's core competencies which you're talking about, those leadership
Leadership principle. That's
principles, and there's
core.
role specific that
Yeah.
can they do the job.
Yeah.
Then there's behavioral and cultural, right?
Yeah.
Cultural. So and I guess also performance or achievement
Yeah.
focus as well.
Yeah.
So those are the
I could
different.
be talking to someone on a function I never heard of before. Like actually one of the borrowers, like they were doing something about animation, right? And specific character animation. Like I've never seen this. I don't know what the bar looks like for this. Therefore, as the bar raiser, they should go and take a look at all the documentation around how to analyze what is a good, what you call animation expert, and what's
Oh,
core.
gotcha.
So
Okay.
you got to learn about it, then go
Then
to the interview, then use that to help calibrate everyone and yourself with your feedback and say yes or no to that candidate.
got it.
Yeah.
Cool. So it definitely sounds like something that if you're not familiar with, could help your organization and yourself professionally as a career. The other topic that I wanted to talk about, which is kind of very much in your face, as in like it's all over the back there, is the AWS certification, and you have your own podcast, very very well known podcast you mentioned earlier. This the Becoming Awesome, and it's a YouTube at AWS Careers that is about the pursuing the certification for AWS. Now, tell me a little bit about why a recruiter who doesn't do the job of AWS cloud engineering or whatever, why pursue a certification? What are the I get what are the reasons, advantages, whatever you want to call it?
All right. So I'm going to start with this. I don't know about you, but if you were to look at my LinkedIn profile, right, and it says, I kind of write the type of people that I was recruiting at that time, like solutions architects or
Mhm.
analytics, et cetera, et cetera. You know how many times I got a message from a recruiter saying, oh, I have an opportunity as a solutions architect, and I think you'll be a perfect fit.
Okay. Yeah. I can imagine every day.
Okay. So I don't want to be that. I don't ever want to be that person. I never have been that person. And the reason why I'm
Well,
not
you could also not be that person and still not be certified.
but it'll go back to this. I'm going to get to that point
Okay.
of
Okay.
certification. I said to go to certification. If I want to, the type of talent I was hired to bring on are the type of people that I would actually do. I would source through white papers. I would source through
Mhm.
authored books, not just keywords on LinkedIn and stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Okay. So in order for me to come across as credible, because those type of individuals that I was personally targeting, they get hit up literally, and I talked to a few of them, hundreds of emails sometimes a day.
Mhm.
The ones, some are like a week, hundreds of emails a week, and then
Yep.
you have some that are hundreds of emails a day. But they respond to me. Why? Because of the way I presented the messaging. So when it comes to the certifications, it did a couple of things. It's it gave me a deepening understanding of the roles that I recruit for and the technologies that the candidates themselves work with. So there's certain verbiage, the vocabulary that I use that they can connect with, and there's like, oh, so you know this? Like, yeah, I do know about that. Builds the credibility. It earns trust. Is one of the
Okay.
big leadership. Does that. I ask meaningful questions during the interviews to ensure there's alignment with the opportunity. I stay current on like the fast evolving industries that we're in, right? By earning some of these relevant certifications. And then it just bridges the gap between recruitment and the technology just for better candidate job matches. So those are like the high level, the key reasons why. So
So it's like a good icebreaker.
yeah,
It's a good at building trust and establishing credibility,
yeah,
and it's good at It's good in helping you basically be familiar with that particular um, technical skill set or
Yeah,
whatever you want to call, the definition of that role. But so what? How do you? Not everybody's recruiting for Amazon,
yeah,
and not everybody's recruiting AWS
yeah.
engineers. So how do you pick what certification you're going to pursue? I mean, do you just happen to like?
Fantastic question. I think you have to take a look at what you are recruiting for because there's certificates for everything, right? If you are someone
That's what I was
that,
asking. Yeah.
yeah, right, because even if you look at if you go to our training and certification on AWS, there's so many different certifications depending on X, right? So depending on who you are, whether you're a recruiter or you're somewhere in tech, if I'm a recruiter focused on this type of technologies, like say just I'm a database person. I recruit database engineers. Okay, I could be working for a startup. I could be working for an agency and just but I'm known for database engineers. Whatever your thing is, I would actually go and just do high level, take a high level certification course because it again brings some credibility. And then at the same time, your messaging will change, your communication with that candidate will change. For example, that candidate may be talking to 5 recruiters, right? Maybe more. But if you're talking to them at a deeper technical level and not just a recruiter trying to pitch a role and my
Mhm.
job's the best type, you get rid of that. I don't sell my roles. I never sell the opportunity. I talk about what it is, but I really try to align what they love doing and say, you know what, that's actually that. This is where you could apply that versus saying this is the best team ever. I once I'm able to dive at a technical level with them, because engineers, for example, they're tech minded. They're like they geek out over certain things, and if you can speak their language, great. So if you are recruiting in sales, and the salespeople that you're trying to recruit for are in say retail, right? Retail folks, look at fashion. Look at this. Take a
Mhm.
look at those. Their certifications on any a lot of things in that world, in the retail world. So imagine you and if there's not a certification, say there's a blog that's always talking about the current current trends in the fashion world, you're on top of that. Say there's a newsletter but there's no certification, you think of that as your certification. A daily thing saying this what just happened in Paris, this is what just got launched here, this what got launched there, and you're able to talk about not just past but then immediate trends, immediate things that are happening right now. You become credible. You're the one that they'll actually listen to more when it comes down to say the closing time.
So certification or not, it's about this subject matter specificity.
Yeah,
Yeah, like because I mean, I was going to use this as an example. Like, I built a team that was recruiting for software engineers. Big surprise, not like I haven't done that before.
mhm,
Google, Microsoft, Cisco, but this was a startup, and there was a little bit of well, it was challenging to attract talent when you're a lesser known company and these
yeah,
people are being they're being recruited by you and by Google and by Facebook and by Netflix, and you're like the tiny little brain that nobody knows anything about, so it gets a little more difficult. um, and there was also a lot of confusion around what the product actually was, so it gets the waters get a little muddy, right? um, so I was like, you know what we need to do? We need to make sure that the people that are on the front lines that are talking to these candidates can actually talk to the candidates, not interview or screen, but actually talk to them.
yeah,
So it was a requirement on that team, on my team. It was a requirement that the people that worked for me actually knew how to read code. They
mhm,
didn't have to program code. I wasn't asking them to write a program that was going to be sold commercially or used in a production environment, but they needed to be able to read be able to understand how to open a Git repo and read segments of code and try to interpret and understand that. And that became a huge advantage when we were talking to candidates that were having competitive offers, because they were this was not by design, but they were much more comfortable talking to us about the opportunity. They would stay on the phone longer and eventually hear the pitch. Not that we were selling, like you said, we were listening to what they had to say and we were understanding, but they stayed on the phone long enough compared to, prior to that, it was like, what's the salary? Like literally just right off the bat. Sure, yeah, I'm interested. What's the salary? What's the job? Like
Yeah.
this, and it's like, do you even want to know what the job is? And the reason they went to that is because they just didn't feel like you would be able to understand what they were saying. So they wanted to jump right to the thing that they could use to say no. So we ended up figuring out that it was a lot easier to have these conversations. Now, there's not necessarily a certification for programming. You can go get a computer science degree, but a lot of the people we were interviewing didn't have computer science degrees, and yet they were
Mhm.
software engineers. So it was, so it's not so much about the certification. It was about being able to be in the environment that they're in and have a conversation about that environment. And believe it or not, what I discovered, and this might be some of the secret sauce for you as well, so tell me if I'm right about this or not, is literally knowing what to ask. Because being able to read the code doesn't not mean we were interpreting the code for quality.
Yeah.
We weren't like reading their code and going, you made a mistake here. This should be this function. No, it was because we understood how to ask the questions and what to ask about and to get them talking. And then we took good notes and we presented that information to the hiring manager. So we transitioned from the hiring manager essentially looking at a resume saying, yeah, to actually listening to us, looking at our notes, and deciding to interview someone without even looking at the resume
Yeah. So
because we were literally checking the boxes that the hiring manager would have looked at. And we were having this conversation with that candidate, and they were telling us about their experience during this call where they would have otherwise, quite frankly, lost their patience and not answered these questions because they feel like you don't know what you're talking about.
yeah. So I'm so glad you brought this up because I'm actually going to tell you a funny story. And for the first 20 years, I was working in the startup. I was working on the agency side primarily for startups. So I wasn't recruiting for the Googles or I wasn't
Right.
part of Amazon or anything like that. So, and early stage startups, no one ever heard of new technology. So
Yeah.
imagine how hard it was, right? But now coming back to, you know, how do I approach these people? How do I gain their interest? How do I get this person to respond to me when there's 100 people sending them messages right now? I always demonstrated learn and be curious. What I did was, which is one of our key leadership principles, one thing that I always did is every week on Monday, I would go and take a look at Angels List or anywhere else to see what new startup just came out with
Mm.
technology that could probably give us an advantage in the recruiting world for any aspect of our job, whether it's to write better messaging, whether it's how to source and write the Boolean or the X-ray searches a certain way to get to identify more talent, right? That's already not in our databases, whatever. Um, there was a product at that time that was ahead of its time called Guild, and what Guild did
Oh, I
did was
remember that. Yeah.
so Guild, which was fantastic, did a couple of things. It would connect with your LinkedIn. You would actually literally put candidates that are in your top tier prospect list in these buckets, and then it would tell you, give you indicators saying, hey, this candidate it has a 20% or 50% probability of them starting to look at new opportunities within the next 2 weeks. How did it know that? It would monitor their profile and notice that this candidate would change their profile picture. They tweak their title. They start adding some keywords and new skills.
Yeah.
Things
Anything
that
to
we all
yeah.
do. It's like if you're about to sell your house, you're gonna tidy up the place and put fresh paint, right? And
Mhm.
all that stuff. It knew that was happening and it would alert me. So then the second part before I reach out is what you brought up with since I can't read code either, it would actually go into their GitHub and actually see, all right, the last 10 projects, all I had to do is put the cursor over the mouse over the project and say 90% in Python, 10% this, boom, boom, boom.
Mhm.
That's all the information I needed to write a message saying, I just came across your GitHub. It looks like out of the last 10 projects, Atlassian projects, 8 of them were written in Python primarily. Over 90% of your code is written in that. I would love to learn more about you and your passions, because I have a customer that is very interested in your type of background for that specific function, but needs someone that loves writing in Python. Would you be interested in having a quick conversation? That's it. I don't talk about salary. I don't talk about nothing. That's all it
Yeah.
took. And the response rate shot through the roof. Okay. So it wasn't an Amazon. I wasn't an Amazon. I was one of the million people that were trying to reach out, but because that was more thoughtful to them, they responded to me. Guess what? They also responded to me 2 weeks later, as if they just read the message. And you want to know why? I asked them, hey, I noticed we were both online. We're both local. Do you mind grabbing a drink? Let's just meet up. It was great. Took him out to a rooftop, bought him a drink. Said, how come it took you 2 weeks to respond to me, by the way?
Yeah.
He goes, let me show you. Being in another top startup, right? In their high growth mode, he goes, look at how many emails I got today. Over 300 internal emails. He goes, now look at how many messages I'm getting on LinkedIn. Over 100 that in the last couple days. So it was just in the pollen, just finally getting to it. That told me, hey, if I had your number and I texted you this, would you have responded immediately? He goes, yeah, I thought you would have been, I thought you were a friend or someone. It's like, great.
Hmm.
Next thing I did, made sure I went and found something that had accurate phone numbers. And I started to implement texting
Yeah.
many years ago before other people started looking at it as an everyday.
Yeah.
I was one of the few that started doing it immediately. Again, you got to think creative, understand them, understand where they're coming from, understand how busy they are. So therefore, short, sweet messages that hit home, and in a format, in a medium that they will look at more faster if you need them faster, right? So applying all these things were what made me successful and continue to make us successful. At Amazon, we just know different ways of doing that at scale. So that's really where it's at.
Yeah. I think it's. I think that the takeaway there is be able to walk the walk the walk, even though you don't have to you don't have to necessarily do the job, right?
Mhm.
Um, but it does raise a little bit of a little bit of a conflict in my mind, that sometimes I get pushback from leaders about, no, we got to hire recruiters that know this industry. And sometimes I kind of think like, well, do you want to hire somebody that's already been there, or do you want to hire somebody that's going to go there?
Mhm.
So, on the one hand, I understand the need to, like I said, be able to read the code, but a couple of the folks that I hired didn't know how to do that when they started. We taught them that. We taught them how to, break it down and understand it, and gave them some tools to be able to do that.
Mhm.
So they learned it. That essentially cemented in my mind the fact that you don't need to have already done this in order to be able to do it. And funny thing about, especially with software developers, very, very seldom do they put their current language that they're learning on their resume. And that's the one that they want to get into. So you probably know about Golang,
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
yeah. So I
absolutely.
was having a hard, the company was having a hard time finding Golang engineers, mostly because a lot of people that were getting into, it was fairly recent. A lot of people that are getting into Golang didn't put it on their resume because they didn't
I'm
know
like
it yet.
Rust today. Like Rust is a new thing that everyone's focused on today, but a
Right.
lot of
And
people
it's not
have.
on their resume because they're learning it now. They're not going to put it on their resume that they worked on a Rust project
Yeah,
because they haven't yet. But
yeah.
this is what they want to get into. So if you approach them and say, "Hey, you know that all that old Java code that you already did, we want you to do more of that." And
Mhm.
they're like, "I don't want to do that anymore. I'm into Rust." Versus you approach them and go, "Hey, I noticed that you're actually writing some code in Rust, pretty new stuff. It seems like, or Golang, which is what I was talking about. It seems like, all we do is Golang 100%. It seems like you might be a good fit." And they're like, "How did you know that I wrote in Golang? Like, where did you find that out? It's not on my LinkedIn." And I'm like, "I don't even know if you have a LinkedIn. Like, I didn't go to LinkedIn to find you.
Yeah.
I read your repo on, GitHub." Um, and then they're like, "Oh." So that was the sort of the icebreaker. Now, that may not necessarily be the same in every industry, but I think there are lots of jobs where you can think about what the person might want to do. Even if you're like, let's say that you're recruiting for nurses.
Yeah.
Well, if you're recruiting for nurses and you're trying to hire someone that's like already done whatever that, ER nursing for 20 years, and you're like going to offer them another ER job, they're going to be like, tell me something I don't know. But what if you find out that they've been taking courses in, I don't know, interventional radiography, right? And you're offering them a job where they're going to get training in that. You need them to already have the experience, but now it's a whole nother conversation. Like, hey, you're getting into that, you're learning it. We need your skills, but we'll also be willing to teach you this. So I think in many industries, you can find a way to reach someone's aspirations
Yeah.
rather than like what triggered me was you already need to know that. Well, do I really? Do I really need to know that?
Yeah.
Because if I got every job based on what I already did, then I would be doing the same thing I was doing when I was 16. I'd
Yeah.
be flipping burgers at Burger King
Yeah. Recruiting is not
still
rocket
because
science.
what I knew how to do.
But recruiting is not rocket science, right? It literally isn't. Like you could teach anyone straight out of school, even if they haven't gone to school, but they have a brain, you could teach them how to recruit because it's just a set of process, like understanding the type of profile and then trying to map where these type of people, what their demographics are, what the geography is, where to find them, how do you communicate with them, etc. If you know how to recruit one thing, you can recruit anything. You can recruit a sous chef, you know.
But I
Here,
think what we're saying is get into the mind of what does a sous chef want to do?
exactly,
What are they so you can
exactly.
talk to them. You don't have to be a sous chef, you can talk to them. So you don't have to have already been that to be learning that, but you do want so certification is in a way proof that you've learned about it.
Yeah, you know it at high
It's
level. Now
evidence.
you're able to communicate with them somewhat effectively. Like you won't know how to read their code yet, and you don't need to, but you can understand the difference between this database and that database. You can understand what they
Right. And you
function
can
are
understand that
doing.
they're doing this,
Yeah,
not that, right?
exactly.
So
And that's
how much
it.
work is it to like just we'll just take AWS because that's yours.
Yeah.
How much work is it to go from 0 to I'm certified?
0 to I'm certified
Yeah, from like
depends on what you're trying to do. So I'm actually looking at I'm in AWS. I'm actually looking at our training and certification site. I'm in my skill builder profile, right? There are certain things that will only take me an hour to get high level. And then there's another one that will take 70 hours that I have to take a look at.
but
And
like there must be a first like there must be a first thing you do that gets you certified, like the basic
so practitioners, anytime you see the word practitioner, that's high level. That's made for people that are non-technical. So for example, I started, and even
with
Matt,
that.
right,
Okay.
is the AWS cloud practitioner. What that means, it literally is for you're in the industry, but you're not necessarily a coder. So both the coders and technical
Mhm.
folks to the sales folks can pass this test because it gives you a high level breakdown what AWS is, what the cloud is,
Okay, right.
that's it.
So what is that? How much work was that?
I think to me the for me it was the modules was probably around like 12 hours, 12 or
Of
13
like
hours, something like
self-study
that.
and then you pass
And
the
then
test.
the practice test for me,
Okay.
I have test anxiety. So I literally did the practice test over and over and over 20 times a day just to memorize all the questions to the point where when I did the 60 question practice test, I would complete it in 7 minutes. All right, 60 questions because I knew exactly what it was asking for. And then you just go and actually take the test. It's it's a proctored exam, so someone's actually watching you take the exam, and
I was about to say because you could be like on, hey, ChatGPT, how do I?
no, it's not so like whether it's in person or it's a virtual proctor, right? Like for example, I was actually in this room when I was getting the certification. I had to take the webcam, show that there's nobody in here. The electronics were unplugged. There's the TV was unplugged. Everything was unplugged. Nobody in the other room. Nothing like that. And then even when I'm sitting there reading the question, I couldn't move my lips. I couldn't be like under my breath. So that person like, don't move your lips. So it's like they really
Oh,
want
because they would think you're talking to somebody.
exactly whispering to someone or something, right? And at the same time, your screen is locked. You can't open up any other browser. You can't do anything. It's completely locked.
This
So
is software, I'm assuming, that does this,
yeah, this from Pearson. So
right?
Pearson View was the one that I went through.
Right. So you
Uh,
can't be like,
no, can't nothing. No, they watch every single thing. But at the same time, I did it fast because I studied for it. I just did the practice exams over and over.
Right? So it's a bit of an investment. So, you know, it's
But it's a long-term investment. But look at that investment.
yeah, I was just thinking about how much the investment. So it's about 20 hours total
Yeah,
to
and then
get something like that,
we
which
talked about this before the show, right? You look at like even investing in this and myself and building the podcast and then showing the gathering the data to show that it's actually something of real value, right? I invested in my long term. I invested in my long term growth. I invested in a skill I never had before. I was never a podcaster before. I had to get speaker certified. Someone that has major imposter syndrome and grew up with a major speech impediment, which is why I speak a little slower right now, so I don't mumble my thoughts and as much as I used to and stutter like crazy. Here I am. Amazon gave me the full freedom to fail if I did, and at the same time they give you all the support so you don't fail. You
mhm.
know, trust it to be speaker certified, trust it to have the only TA live stream for them. And I did this, and then when you look at the layoffs and everything that happened in the tech world across everyone, I tell everyone, I said, strip recruiting out of the equation. We could teach anyone to be a recruiter. What are your superpowers? What else are you known for? What are you visible for? That's going to separate you from the pack, and you got to do that. That's what I tell
Yeah,
all my
whether that's certification or
certification or this or that.
yeah.
Do something that shows you genuinely care about being better or helping others be better. Being at my level as a senior level, right? I have to be a force multiplier. I have to build something that's going to help make the team better, or I have to mentor to help someone elevate to this level. So that's the expectations that are at our level. So, but at the same time, the bottom line foundational, we can teach anyone to source. Sourcing is the easy part. Influencing and building and being like a force multiplier, that's this other thing. So you got to separate yourself in that aspect.
Yeah. I it's been a lot of information, and I wanted to we're getting pretty close to time, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to respond to the two questions that I ask. If you've watched the show before, you know that I always ask two questions at the end.
I haven't seen the back end of the show, so let's
Okay,
go.
all right.
Whatever it is, I'll
Yeah,
be
so I
ready.
always close out with two things that a lot of folks really watch this as a recording because
Yeah.
even though I tried to be um, mindful of Fridays at 1, probably one of the easier times for people to attend. It's not exactly can always make it, so a lot of folks usually watch it on the weekends and so on. So I like to do these two things. First of all, my first question would be, which is how I got in touch with you. Who should be our next guest?
Oh, that's a great question. I wish I knew. I wish I thought about this.
And that's I want to put you on the spot because I want you to think right off the top of your head who's somebody you want to see on the show. That doesn't mean they're going to accept the invitation, but I'd like to invite them. So who do you think I should invite? Eh,
I would love
just-
Jenna. I would love Jenna to do this. Jenna Lass. She's actually my co-host on from Becoming Awesome, but she's the principal level here. She's someone that when I first joined, I was like, I want to become like Jenna. That's generally the person when I first joined Amazon. Once I started to see the team, like I want to learn from her. And then it took years until I had the courage and the idea to say, "What do you think about this?" And they're like, "Yeah, let's do that. That's big."
Done.
So
All right. I'll
yeah,
invite her. Hopefully she'll accept.
yeah.
So you're off the hook for that one. And the second question is a little bit more philosophical, and it's more about like one of the things I have always aspired to is to be a thought provoker, right?
Yeah.
I don't really like the idea of a thought leader.
Mhm.
It just functionally doesn't seem like I personally am offended by someone thinking that they lead my thoughts. It just sort of feels weird. But what I do like is I've always been a student of the peripatetic model and Socratic model. Those of that have been unfortunate enough to study under me know that I ask a lot of tough questions.
Uh-huh.
So one of the things I like to have in this show is something that prompts people to think deeply about something for themselves. So my ask to you is leave us with a question we can ask ourselves. Could be about anything we talked about today or just something else, but something that we we should ask ourselves and think about for ourselves. What should we think about when we watch this show over the weekend or whatever?
I think that's actually a much easier one. What impact are you making on the world while you do this
Okay, so
job?
ask yourself, what impact
Am I
do
making
you
on the
make?
world?
Okay,
And I genuinely say this, and it's not just in because I'm at Amazon and everything else. It literally is. I do feel that, someone like yourself, you from the health issues that you have, I have my own. I see the people around me, right? Life is short. I try to be a genuine human being that tries to help out anyone I can, any chance I can. Even if you look at my internal, we call it phone tools, our internal directory, people have a quote. I said, I'll give you the shirt off my back. Hopefully, it's just during warmer weather, So that's really what I write. And the reason why I'm still here at Amazon is because I have a daughter that has a rare vision loss disease, right? She had rare retinal disease where she's losing her vision, and it's going to continue going that way with initially no cure. But the technology that we're recently building is helping these companies find cures. We now have new tools that are now is we're
that
now in the world
may
of what's possible, right?
right.
Hey, what if we try this? What if we try that? So the impact I'm trying to make is trying to find the smartest people in the world that's going to help make the world a better place. That's going to it's either going to help save lives or help improve lives. That's why I do what I do, and that's why I'm doing it here. And that's literally what I want to leave with.
I like that. I like that. I think I want to be a little bit more generous to some folks that may have a hard time with thinking at that in that way, and say, how are you making other people's lives better? How are you improving other people's lives? It doesn't have to be other people; it could be one person.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
if you make one person's life better, that's an impact already. Now, start with
absolutely.
that. Right? You don't have to come up with the cure for world hunger. Should we all be so lucky to be Bill Gates and have all the money in the world, or whatever? But really, if you can think of a way that you are improving someone else's life, is someone else's,
Yeah.
period. That's a really good thing to aspire to. So that's the question then. How are you improving other people's person's life?
Yeah, yeah.
I
I mean,
like that.
like I look at Chrissy, she's like super engaged. She reminds me of Isaiah LeBras, who's on our show, right? Super engaged and everything else. We just found out that he applied all the learnings from our show and the tips that we
And
gave.
got certified.
He actually got a job at another company doing what he loves, what he really is good at, and because he applied those learning, how to interview and the
Yeah.
specific things.
Yeah.
We love that. They're someone that's transitioning their career from financial to try to get into tech,
Hmm.
but they still love financial. They ended up getting something in a market where it's tough, where there's a lot of competition, right, for jobs. They landed something
Yep.
because of the tips, and they wrote a beautiful email saying that to us. I was like,
That's just awesome. That's just
how
awesome. Yeah.
cool is that?
That is so cool.
So,
I'll share a cool anecdote with you. So, a long time ago, I had a foundation, nonprofit foundation for years, for 7 years, that helped people become recruiters and sourcers. And we found that there was a huge impact in the community of blind and visually impaired, in particular. One of the most hard hit in a lot of ways, most underemployed and unemployed in many respects. And the reason what we were just talking about made me think about this guy who he's blind, and his wife had a motion disability. So between the two of them, they had a bit of a tough go at it. And he was referred into the foundation through a local organization that provides vocational rehabilitation training and things like that. So we took him under our wing, ended up hiring him first as an intern. And it turned out that this person was brand new into recruiting, sourcing, the whole works. So didn't know anything about the industry. Ended up making such a huge contribution to Greenhouse, the ATS,
yeah,
because he figured out through his own scrappiness how to do some of the things that he was supposed to be doing blind. So, in other words, Greenhouse did not have the required, um, whatever it is, the required technology to
Mhm.
assist visually impaired. A lot
Right.
of websites allow you to do screen readers and things like that. So he went in there and was trying to do his job. It's like, I can't see anything here because normally my screen reader does these things, and it's like. So he ended up figuring out how to do it anyway. So he hacked his way around, figured out how to do it. Then I
Clicking
was like,
away and
wow.
saying, "This does this, this does that," and just
Exactly. And
mapping everything.
then we went back to Greenhouse and said, y'all, it's kind of embarrassing that you're a fairly mature company and didn't have this. And like, we've never had anybody that was a blind user. And I'm like, oh, I get that. I get that, because that's one of the things the foundation did, was identify the fact that people just never think about that.
Yeah.
So then we're like, well, we work with this guy, and he started working with them, and they ended up implementing a bunch of fixes that made it possible for, I don't know how many blind users they have now, but it made it possible for blind people
Right.
or visually impaired people to use greenhouses and ATS
How
because of
cool.
this literally kid, young guy that was just so, you know, I'm not trying to take any credit here. We helped him get a job as a sorcerer, but what he did improved the lives of anybody else in the future that might be a visually impaired or blind person using greenhouse. So just absolutely amazing, the waterfall effect. I may have changed his life, but he then took that and amplified it times. I don't know. I can't even project it. Right? So
Listen, companies
you
that
start
are
with one person, and that makes a difference.
the companies that are focusing on people with disabilities, it's great from a human perspective, and it's great for your profits. It's that simple.
Oh yeah,
There's
yeah,
just
for sure.
another multi-billion-dollar opportunity right there if
Mhm.
you focus on them as well. So, which is
So
all
let's
you can do.
wrap it up.
Yeah,
Yeah, basically just have, if you help that one person improve their lives, you never know how far that's going to go.
yeah, yeah,
So how are you doing that? Thanks a lot, Ray. Appreciate it.
yeah.
Everybody out there, follow his show. If you want to learn a little bit more about it, it's AWS Careers on YouTube, and connect with him on LinkedIn. We are not going to have a Shally's Alley. So this is, once again, my last episode for 2024, because next week is the Friday after Christmas before New Year's. And I'm going to have a little bit of a vacation, but we will see you here next year. I know, a whole year away. And our guest will be Seth Davis, a local prodigy here in Atlanta, former police officer who left the force to become a recruiter and a sorcerer, and has some interesting things to say about leadership. So hopefully you'll tune in next week. Until then, Happy New Year. Take care, everybody. Bye bye.
Thanks. Take care. Thanks for